जमुना तीरा बनचारी जमुना तीरा बनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय पंचतत्व जय पंचतत्व पंचतत्व जय पंचतत्व जय प्रहलाद नृसिंह जय अनंत देव प्रह्लाद नृसिंह जय अनंत देव। जय जगन्नाथ जय बलदेव, सुभद्रा माई जय जय सुदर्शन। जय राधा माधव अष्टसखी, गिरि गोवर्धन जय गिरि गोवर्धन। जय जय प्रभुपाद प्रभुपाद प्रभुपाद, जय जय प्रभुपाद। जय जय गुरुदेव गुरुदेव गुरुदेव, जय जय गुरुदेव। निताय गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल, निताय गौर हरि बोल। ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजक आचार्य अष्टोत्तर सत हिज डिवाइन ग्रेस अभय चरणारविंद भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी श्रील प्रभुपाद की, नामाचार्य श्रील हरिदास ठाकुर की, प्रेम से कहिए जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद की, श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपिका श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरिराज गोवर्धन जी महाराज की, ब्रजभूमि वृंदावन धाम की, नवद्वीप मायापुर धाम की, श्री क्षेत्र जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की, गंगा माई की, जमुना मैया की, तुलसी महारानी की, समवेत भक्त वृंद की, अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की। ऑल ग्लोरीज टू assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam namaskrityam naram chaiva narottamam daivim saraswati vyasam tato jayo mudirayet nashtaprayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavat sevaya भगवती उत्तम श्लोके भक्तिर्भवती नष्ट की। I apologize for coming 5 minutes late to the class today. We would read from Canto 2nd, Chapter 10, verse number 8. Kindly repeat after me. Yo adhyātmiko ayam puruṣaḥ sa sav evādhidaivikaḥ yas tatrobhaya-vicchedaḥ puruṣo ādhibhautikaḥ. Yo adhyātmiko ayam puruṣaḥ so asave adhidaivikaḥ yas tatrobhaya-vicchedaḥ puruṣo ādhibhautikaḥ. Yo adhyātmiko ayam puruṣaḥ sa sav evādhidaivikaḥ yas tatrobhaya-vicchedaḥ puruṣo ādhibhautikaḥ. Yo adhyātmiko ayam puruṣaḥ so asau evādhidaivikaḥ yas tatrobhaya-vicchedaḥ puruṣo ādhibhautikaḥ. Yo adhyātmiko ayam puruṣaḥ so asau evādhidaivikaḥ yas tatrobhaya-vicchedaḥ puruṣo ādhibhautikaḥ. Yo adhyātmiko ayam puruṣaḥ so asau evādhidaivikaḥ yas tatrobhaya-vicchedaḥ puruṣo ādhibhautikaḥ. Vaishnavis. Yo adhyātmiko ayam puruṣaḥ so asau evādhidaivikaḥ yas tatrobhaya-vicchedaḥ puruṣo ādhibhautikaḥ. Yah, one who, adhyātmikaḥ, is possessed of the sense organs. Ayam, this, puruṣaḥ, personality. Sah, he, asau, that, eva, also, adhidaivikaḥ, controlling deity. Yah, that which, tatra, there, ubhaya, of both, vicchedaḥ, separation, puruṣaḥ, person, he, for, ādhibhautikaḥ, the visible body or the embodied living entity. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Abhay Charanarvind, Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. Please repeat the translation after me. The individual person possessing different instruments of senses is called the adhyātmic person, and the individual controlling deity of the senses is called adhidaivic. The embodiment seen on the eyeballs is called the ādhibhautic person. Purport. The supreme controlling summum bonum is the personality of Godhead in his plenary portion of Paramātmā, or the Supersoul manifestation. In the Bhagavad-gītā 10.42, it is said, Athaiv bahunetena kum gnatena tavarjuna vistabhyam idam kritsnam ekamanshen sthito jagata. All the controlling deities like Vishnu, Brahma and Shiv are different manifestations of the Paramātmā feature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, who exhibits himself in such manners by entering into each and every universe generated from him. But still, apparently there are divisions of the controller and controlled. For example, in the food controlling department, the controller of food is a person made of the same ingredients as the person who is controlled. Similarly, each and every individual in the material world is controlled by the higher demigods. For example, we have our senses, but the senses are controlled by superior controlling deities. We cannot see without light, and the supreme controller of light is the sun. The sun god is in the sun planet, and we, the individual human beings or any other beings on this earth, are all controlled by the sun god as far as eyes are concerned. Similarly, all the senses we have are controlled by the superior demigods, who are also as much living entities as we are, but one is empowered while the other is controlled. The controlled living entity is called the adhyātmic person, and the controller is called the adhidaivic person. All these positions in the material world are due to different fruitive activities. Any individual living being can become the sun god, or even Brahma or any other god in the upper planetary system by a higher grade of pious work. And similarly, one becomes controlled by the higher demigods by lower grades of fruitive activities. So every individual living entity is subject to the supreme control of the Paramātmā, who puts everyone in different positions of the controller and the controlled. That which distinguishes the controller and controlled, that is, the material body, is called the ādhibhautic puruṣ. The body is sometimes called puruṣ, as confirmed in the Veda in the following hymn: Sava eva puruṣo anna rasamayah. This body is called the anna rasa embodiment. This body depends on food. The living entity which is embodied does not eat anything. However, because the owner is a spirit in essence, the material body requires a replacement of matter for the wearing and tearing of the mechanical body. Therefore, the distinction between the individual living entity and controlling planetary deities is in the Rasamaya body. The sun may have a gigantic body and the man may have a smaller body, but all these visible bodies are made of matter. Nonetheless, the sun god and the individual person, who are related as the controller and the controlled, are the same spiritual parts and parcel of the Supreme Being, and it is the Supreme Being who places different parts and parcels in different positions, and thus the conclusion is that the Supreme Person is the shelter of all. Srila Prabhupada ki. Om Ajnana-timirandhasya Gnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam yena bhutale Swayam Rupaha Kadamahiyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeyaham Shri Gurun Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagan Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute. Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Once again, on behalf of ISKCON Mayapur, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you. So, a very interesting chapter in the sense that the very first verse of chapter 10 talks about the 10 ingredients or 10 elements that are discussed at length in Srimad Bhagavatam. So, this class would be in two parts. In part 1, we would be discussing this beautiful purport given by Srila Prabhupada, where he is talking about a very specific distinction between ādhibhautic, adhidaivic and adhyātmic. And in the second part, we'll try to shed some light on sarg, visarg and the other elements. It's causeless mercy of Srila Prabhupada that it's like he handholds. So when he's giving these definitions and he gives these examples, it's a very personal feeling, because in the absence of these examples, it's not easy to understand these differences. So we will look at these three things which are being discussed here. The living entity itself, when tries to lord over the material nature, at that time, that living entity comes into a conditioned state of being. In simple words, when one jeev, when one living entity wants to become Ishwar, controller, at that time, he is put into this conditioned state of existence. So, when he is put into this conditioned state, he is controlled completely. So he has the freedom of selection. So he can exercise his free will partially. What does that mean? You may decide which organization to join to work for. But once you join in, then the rules of that organization are compulsory upon you. Then you have to work like that. So for example, all of us joined ISKCON. Then Srila Prabhupada made certain rules and we have to follow. So whether we select a Brahma Kumari or an Art of Living or an ISKCON or any other institute, initial choice lies with us. Later on, everything is controlled by the employer or the organization. Similarly, when we fall into this material whirlpool, if I may call it, then choice is ours that I want to enter into this body. I like this kind of body, this color, this gender, so on and so forth. But once you are into that, then you are bounded. Because of that, that living entity is right now being addressed as adhyātmic and at the same time adhibhautic. So there is a minor variation happening here. Because he is a pure soul and a controlled soul, technically, then it's adhyātmic. But the moment you say it is a soul and it is inside a body, residing in a body, then because of that body, it will be called adhibhautic. So that distinction must be kept in mind. So if someone says, you are not this body, you are the soul, actually speaking, it is incorrect. At this juncture, that's not my correct description. At this juncture, I am not soul alone. I need an adjective. and that adjective is embodied. So all of us right now are what? We are embodied souls. That must be kept in mind. Once we are liberated, the laws of nature don't work upon us, then we are the soul. But in the current state of existence, we are embodied soul. And that's why if you go back and look at this word, ādhibhautic, the word by word translation says the visible body or the embodied living entity. I apologize, but the subject matter is slightly technical. So if you feel a little dense or sleepy, then it's due to the subject matter being covered here. But for clarity's sake, just understand it once and for all. Living entity who is controlled is adhyātmic. Living entity who is embodied is adhibhautic. This distinction should be clear. And now onwards, if somebody ever asks you, who are you? Then we are right now what? Embodied souls. Once we are in a liberated state of existence, the body, the laws of nature don't work upon us. The third one is adhidaivic. And then again Srila Prabhupada goes more technical. He says the adhidaivic is also a controlled living entity. So the adhidaivic is adhyātmic first, but he is adhyātmic plus empowered. So it's like in a classroom, you have many students and then there is one monitor. So monitor is also a student, but monitor is empowered. So sun god is also under the laws of nature, but he has certain powers with which he works upon us. For the clarity's sake, Srila Prabhupada, being merciful, gave examples which are very, very simple. But I'm sure most of you must have read in Srimad Bhagavatam that the demigods are sitting on all the parts of our body. So much so that even on our eyebrows. So this flipping that happens, that movement is also controlled by a particular demigod. And the hearing organ is also controlled by a particular, and looking at that structure, due to the mercy of Srimad Bhagavatam, we realize that Krishna went super technical when he created us. And he was so personally concerned that he ensured that to do this, he would need this empowerment, to do this, he would need, and therefore there has to be a controlling deity. On tongue, on eyelids, eyebrows, ear, everywhere there is a controlling deity sitting in our body. So the empowered living entity who is originally adhyātmic, when he is empowered, he becomes adhidaivic as well. Now when you look at the example of sun god, Prabhupada is saying eyes alone cannot do anything in darkness. Darkness has to be dissipated for eyes to see something. And that empowerment has been given to sun god. He is now highlighting the relationship between controlling and controlled. So the term controller in Sanskrit is called Ishvara. In loose colloquial language, the term Ishwar is thought of as Supreme Personality of Godhead. But that's also an incorrect description. There are Ishwar, then Maha Ishwar, and then Paramishwar. So a father is a god to the children, and if I may take the liberty, to the wife, because he's a representative, provided she accepts. Coming back. Similarly, a boss is also an Ishwar or a controller onto the subordinate, but only as far as office work is related. After that, he is not. Then your members of parliament, your chief ministers, your prime minister, Ishwar, Ishwar, Ishwar with higher powers. This is in a normal. Then if you go to the Vedic structure, then you say, okay, so all the demigods have been given the powers, so they are also controllers. But within that, Lord Brahma is highest. But higher than Lord Brahma is Lord Shiva. And then higher than Lord Shiva is Lord Vishnu. Brahma is still a living entity. Brahma is a Jiva Tattva. Lord Shiva is not a Jiva Tattva. He is beyond that. I mean, I'm sure you know, but those of you who aren't aware, Lord Shiva can also grant liberation. And his devotees can perpetually live with him in Kailash, serving him with a joyful heart. Though Lord Shiva perpetually meditates on Lord Balaram, and then Lord Balaram perpetually meditates upon Lord Krishna. So when you look at these Ishvara, then you Ishwar, then they say Maheshwar, and then you say Parameshwar. So Param Ishwar means supreme controller. That supreme controller, out of his causeless love for us, created this entire gigantic structure and empowered multiple living entities. Last thing from the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, how do you become an empowered living entity? Then he is saying the path to become an empowered living entity is to amass piety. So understand this difference very clearly. I'm sorry for using this language somehow, because of the routine classes I use this kind of, it's not good to say understand. You all are elevated devotees here. Maharaj is sitting here. I apologize for this statement. The example which is given here, wherein we look at sun, and then Prabhupada is saying that he needs to amass piety. In order to become a devotee, do you need to amass similar kind of piety? No. You don't. Nor do you care. It is like there may be a golden city, but if my focus, my absorption is in the service to my master, and all I want is to please him, then I don't care for that golden city. Because my focus, gaze of my consciousness is separate. So Indra, and I'm sure you know, Indra is not the name of a person, Indra is a designation, and so is Brahma. So on these designations, those empowered living entities who are sitting, they have amassed that piety, and that piety is largely born out of mode of goodness. But Shuddha Sattva is something that a devotee practices, and he stays in that permanent constitutional position of pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. All glories to him. Because he has rejected all the attractions, all possible, all manorathas, and he focused. And that is why a devotee is the greatest. Because he did not care for riches, nor was he anxious that he would slip into poverty. We'll take 3 to 5 minutes more to elaborate upon this. When Vyasadeva was not satisfied after writing the Vedic literature, and when Narad Muni gave him the knowledge, why did Vyasadeva feel incomplete? Unknowingly, he gave living entities various ideas to enjoy while being in this body and in the next body. So it's all right. Here you are 80 years, 100 years, you will be living on this planet. No worries. Keep doing good work. So do charity, perform austerities, so on and so forth, so that in Pitralok you will not face difficulty. Then in next birth you will not face difficulty. And what Vyasadeva did, he therefore unknowingly increased their span, their stay here in this material world, which is padam padam yad vipadam. On every step there is danger here. So when somebody, it's like I'm traveling in a train and I get attached to my seat in my bogie, and all I want is I'm putting a nice cloth over there and spraying it and taking care of it, and putting some flower vase also there. Those kind of things we all start doing while living here. And that's what pissed off Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada most, when he came to know that when this temple got built and the brahmacharis were discussing who will take which room. Mind you, it is easier said than done. We also are highly likely to behave in the same manner. It's just that the examples are different. Why did that Mataji get the prasadam first? Why me late? Is yet another example only. The point being made is that the living entity always wants to be comfortable here. Unknowingly, Srila Vyasadeva made arrangements for that. Perform Ashwamegh Yajna, perform this yajna, do this sacrifice, and then next life and 100 life span, you will always get a very good son. And people are doing swaha, swaha, swaha. Here we are getting an opportunity now to look at the stature of a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anya abhilashita shunya. Devoid of all other desires. Also no designation. I am nobody's father, mother, this, that. I am duty bound to play that role. That's fine. But originally knowing fully well that I am not that, this is my temporary identity. So this distinction, it went slightly complex, that one who is ādhibhautic sometimes can act as adhidaivic also. So sun god at least he is pure devotee. Let's come a little down, Indra and downwards. Agni, for example, a mixed devotee of Krishna. They are embodied living beings. And at the same time, they are empowered also. So one who is ādhibhautic can be given the power to create or control by Krishna. So this is the distinction. I wish to ask all you devotees, is this amply clear or do I need to elaborate more on this? Adhibhautic, adhidaivic and adhyātmic. Because Prabhupada's purport made it, solidly clear that this is what it is. Same person is being defined, same soul. Once when the soul is embodied, it's adhibhautic. Soul, when it is controlled, is adhyātmic. Soul who is controlled, who is embodied, but who is empowered, is adhidaivic. That's what happens when you go technical into these subject matters, that you start seeing layers and layers. So in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Uddhav asks Krishna, he says, sometimes some people say that the material elements are 7 only. Sometimes they say 11, some 13, 16, 26, 28, 30. Can you tell me who is right? And Krishna says all of them are right. So then Uddhav further, he said, how come? He said, no, it's just a category or an expansion. So if I say that 5 senses, then I don't need to sometimes elaborate on the object of the senses. So I may say eyes, but not the sense of sight. I may say skin, but not the sense of touch. So sometimes they, open the categories, and that's how they expand. And then, when you are describing the material world, you go up to 5 senses, then knowledge gathering, action oriented, then the Panch Mahabhut, tattvas, earth, air, water, ether, fire. Then the 5 objects of the senses, that makes them 20. Then mind, then intelligence, then false ego. All right, so 23. Then you add one more and you say mahata tattva. Okay, 24. Now what? Then you say living entity. No, but the living entity is not a part of the material world. Then some of they say living entity and then God himself. So that's how they become 25. So you can reduce or expand, but nobody is wrong. So in Vedic literature, therefore there is always a need of a bona fide guide to let you know what is what. Otherwise there is high likelihood that you would interpret things born out of your perception of the world. Since some of you are feeling a little sleepy, let's raise our hands and chant 3 times. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Now, as I mentioned in the beginning of the class, we will just touch upon this very famous verse, which is there in the 2nd canto, chapter 10, verse number 1st. And then actually the previous 7 verses are nothing but an expansion of that. And Prabhupada never misses an opportunity. Towards the end of his purport, he again said, and thus the conclusion is that the Supreme Person is the shelter of all. Because Ashraya is the last one. So, Shukdev Maharaj says, you can repeat, I'll try to say, Atra sarga visargascha sthanam poshanam yutaha manvantare shishanukatha. So now, I'll just, sorry for breaking this. What is happening here is, 10 elements are contained in this Srimad Bhagavatam. Slightly scholarly subject now. Imagine yourself before you became a devotee, or any normal person. Certain questions everybody asks. Oh, Gauranga Prabhu is here. Pranam. Sorry, I didn't pay attention. So, any question you ask, Prabhupada gives in the purport, that you are, say, when you are lying down and you are looking at the large sky, and in the large sky you see these innumerable stars, and then a normal question comes, from where did they all come? And then who created them? And who generated them? And who created me? And then the set of questions, who am I, who is God, what is time, what is Kal, what is Prakriti, like that. So Srimad Bhagavatam, being the Mahapuran or the major Puran, it covers these 10 aspects, beginning with who created this whole thing. And that's why it's called Sarga. Sarga, English translation is primary creation. And the 16 elements are covered in that primary creation, which means from Lord Vishnu's navel till Brahma comes into the picture. And then when Brahma creates Srishti, that becomes Visarga. But where is this whole thing happening? So the 14 planetary systems. So that becomes Sthanam. And then the living entities have been placed depending on all their pending desires which are yet to be fulfilled. I'll just take a detour to highlight how merciful Krishna is. That in Bhagavad-gītā, he just in an elementary fashion he touches upon it, that I am the Jathar Agni, or the acid. So we eat and we forget, and then Krishna comes onto the job and he digests. And then he says, I am the remembrance. From me comes the remembrance and forgetfulness. So if we don't forget certain incidents, it's impossible to move on in life. And the remembrance and forgetfulness is not as literal as the example I gave. Actually, the remembrance is knowing you are the soul, and forgetfulness is, forgetting your real identity. But the main point is that Krishna is, he's sitting inside our heart, he's working on our liver, he's working on our memory, and making sure that we fulfill our desires which are self-centered, which are not God-centered. And here the term mercy comes into the picture, because who bothers about the other person? If you want to do something, you manage, you create. Krishna doesn't do that. He takes care of each and every living entity, irrespective of whether he is inimical or amenable. Irrespective of that. And that is because Krishna, Prabhupada mentions, is the shelter of Shuddha Sattva also, where honor, dishonor, heat, cold, nothing can, waver you from your position. He's so solidly, because he is the supreme, personality of Godhead, so he has that control. But when we come to Srimad Bhagavatam, then we come to know that Mahavishnu and then Garbhodakshashai Vishnu and then Shirodakshashai Vishnu, it's like macro to micro, Krishna became so super involved in everything without infringing upon the free will. So he says, okay, from my pores, when I exhale, unlimited universes would come out. And in each universe, I will only lie as Garbhodakshashai. So from Mahavishnu's pore, universes come out, and in each universe, Krishna again comes. And from Garbhodakshashai Vishnu's navel, Brahma comes and the whole Srishti becomes possible. But in each living entity's heart, he again enters. It's like minutest thing, what thought passes through us is being noticed by him, Upadrashta, Anumanta, and is being permitted by him. But at the same time, he is situated in Golok Vrindavan, where if you want to go, then you have to go through a long process of aligning your consciousness with his consciousness. But when you look at Sarg and Visarg and these huge time cycles of Brahma's lifespan, within that Brahma's day, which is Kalp, and within Kalp again the Manvantars, and the 14 planetary system, then the impetus, Uta, to work, and nurturing them, giving poshan. So then the living entity who understands this knowledge by the mercy of a pure devotee like Srila Prabhupada becomes increasingly grateful to God. Two things. One, I am a rebellious soul. Two, despite fully knowing I am rebellious, Krishna continuously serves me. When the 4 Kumaras go and they are stopped, at that time Lord Vishnu comes and he says to the 4 Kumaras that by serving Brahmanas, I have become so powerful. And sometimes we may think, this is exaggeration. But it isn't. He is Shamas, Damas, Tapas, Shaucham, all these qualities that he highlights in Bhagavad-gītā, also in Srimad Bhagavatam and elsewhere. Whoever lives that lifestyle, Krishna gets sold on to that living entity. Look at 2 sentences. In one place in Bhagavad-gītā, he says, Kripana phala hetva. This shows that first, God is a person and God is highly opinionated. When he says Kripana phala hetva, it's like it's like a statement where he exhibits that he doesn't like it. Kripana phala hetava means miserly people live to enjoy the fruits of their own labor. Now, take this and look at the statements which are given by today's youngsters. It's my life, I want to live it my way, I have earned it for me, I have full right to spend it on me. And the Supreme Personality of Godhead says, Kripana phala hetava. And in 3rd chapter, he then flips around. And then he says, Tasmat sarva gatam brahman nityam yagye pratishtitam. If you want to locate where God resides, God perpetually resides in the acts of sacrifice. So look at this thing. On the one hand, he doesn't like when people enjoy the fruit of their labor. He calls them kripan. On the other hand, he says, I personally reside in the acts of sacrifice. He is highlighting his nature. And that act of sacrifice he is doing since time immemorial for all of us by giving us all this system continuously. We may say, no, he is very powerful, he has unlimited energies who are working, he is personally not bothered. The fact is, because contradiction can peacefully coexist in Krishna, so therefore, even if his energies are working, he is working in his direction, maya adhyakshena prakriti. Otherwise, energy will also not work. So by looking at all these things that Krishna does, which is again not just Ish Anukatha and then Nirodh, destruction also, so that the living entities get a new chance. Okay, out of 100, 2 got fulfilled, you added 16 more, so now 114 new desires, take a new body, fulfill again. And again, and again. Out of our envy, we take that mercy as, for granted, and we think that Krishna is a cop. This is called spiritual illiteracy. It's not that you know so many mantras and this and that, no. Spiritual illiteracy is because in your heart, you are not able to generate that gratefulness because you don't know the nature. Mad bhavam agatah. Everywhere in Bhagavad-gītā also he says he attains my nature, my nature. He's highlighting that. And his nature is perpetual act of sacrifice, which is getting elaborated here in Sarg, Visarg and all these things. So the last thing in today's session is that looking at Krishna's Karuna Sindhu, is the ocean of mercy. These kind of verses should enhance our surrender to him willfully. The whole process of, spiritual endeavor is aimed at behavioral shift, where from being a rebellious one, you become an aligned one. And aligned one is not a neutral state. Aligned one is a state of positive affinity, where you do everything for his pleasure. And it's a great, joyful state of existence. And Srimad Bhagavatam, Nityam Bhagavat, when we read it daily, then that technique of alignment gradually develops in us, which is way beyond these verbal expressions. You may become a Bhakti Shastri and a Bhakti Vaibhav and a Bhakti Vedant degrees, and you may acquire all of them, and still the gaze of consciousness can be self-centered. As against that, a soft heart who is perpetually thankful because he gained this knowledge that this is what God is doing for me, that person is going back to Krishna in this lifetime. Thank you so much. If you have any correction or a comment, please share. Okay. So because today is beatific darshan, so we would now call it a day. Thank you so much. Srimad Grantraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanand. Hari Hari.